You have single-handedly ruined this family's name, Amelia. Ruined it with your reckless choices, your ingratitude, and your total inability to understand what prestige requires. My mother, Eleanor Hayes, delivered the hook with a controlled, venomous whisper that nonetheless felt louder than the hundreds of guests mingling in the grand ballroom of the Hayes Global Finance, HGF, headquarters. Her eyes, usually softened by cosmetic goodwill, were glacial, fixed not on my face but on the shame I represented. The air was thick with the scent of expensive champagne and the heady perfume of false prosperity. Tonight was supposed to be the capstone of my father's career, the HGF 40th anniversary gala, celebrating the longevity and supposed integrity of the firm. Instead, it felt like a magnificent ticking time bomb. My name is Amelia Hayes. I am 31 years old, and for the last 7 years I have been the family's perpetual disappointment, the only child who chose to abandon the gilded cage of corporate finance for the austere, thankless world of forensic data analysis. To my parents, Arthur and Eleanor, and my brother Conrad, who measured life in quarterly reports and visible assets, my career was invisible, paranoid, and utterly destructive to the family's image. The context and character intro was rooted in deep structural hypocrisy. My father, Arthur Hayes, 60, was a titan of investment, known for his ethical leadership. My older brother, Conrad, 35, was the heir apparent, slick, charismatic, and already acting like the CEO, despite lacking any real sense of fiduciary responsibility. Their lives were defined by visible prestige, the corner office, the political connections, the flawless, publicly curated reputation of the Hayes name. I was the anomaly, the one who saw the numbers behind the facade, the one who knew the truth was rotten. The background conflict had begun when I refused to join HGF after college. Instead of leveraging my finance degree for profit, I specialized in regulatory compliance and fraud detection. My mother's accusation, that I had ruined the name, stemmed from my subsequent refusal to cover for Conrad's escalating professional recklessness 5 years ago. I had seen the early warning signs of his accounting manipulation and left the firm, citing ethical incompatibility, a phrase that earned me immediate and total excommunication. They spun the narrative that I was unstable, too sensitive, and jealous of Conrad's success. I didn't ruin the name, Mother, I stated, keeping my voice low and level. I simply refused to participate in its destruction. Don't be dramatic, Eleanor scoffed, her gaze sliding past me to acknowledge a passing senator. We are talking about a minor private disagreement. You chose to abandon your family for a ridiculous job chasing shadows. Now look at you. No husband, no equity, and a career that forces you to live like a mole. Your brother is closing the biggest deal in HGF history this month. That is success. Conrad arrived then, wearing the self-satisfied grin of a man who believed his entitlement was bulletproof. He wrapped an arm around my mother and looked down at me with genuine, pitying contempt. Still working on those spreadsheets, Amelia? Conrad drawled. Dad and I were just laughing about your ethical incompatibility clause. It cost us 2 weeks of legal fees to scrub that from the exit paperwork. You could have been a partner by now. Instead, you're wearing an off-the-rack dress at our biggest gala. When are you going to realize your paranoia is the only thing holding you back? The humiliation scene was now at its zenith. The familiar sting of their collective dismissal was almost unbearable. But tonight, it was a necessary fuel. They were celebrating the height of their triumph, utterly unaware that the ground was about to swallow them whole. I stopped being paranoid, Conrad, I said, a slow, dark satisfaction rising in my chest. The moment my analysis was confirmed. Confirmed what? Arthur interrupted, joining the circle, his voice strained. He was nervous, far more stressed than a retiring CEO should be. He knew instinctively that the firm was operating on borrowed time. Confirmed that your biggest deal in HGF history is built on a foundation of shell companies, phantom assets, and unsecured debt, I stated, ignoring the frantic warning signal flashing in my mind. It's not a merger, Arthur. It's a Ponzi scheme and it's about to collapse. The air froze. Arthur's face went white. Conrad looked less smug and more terrified. Eleanor gave a sharp, hysterical laugh. Get out! Arthur hissed, grabbing my arm with a crushing grip. You are deliberately trying to sabotage this family. You're sick! Get out of this building before I have security remove you. Security won't remove me tonight, Dad, I replied, pulling my arm free. In fact, they might want to talk to you. The proof of worth. Revelation began not with my words, but with a sudden, devastating influx of unexpected guests. The ballroom entrance doors swung open, and the crowd noise immediately died. Standing there were 3 impeccably dressed men, but their bearing was unmistakable. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC investigators, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. They scanned the room, their eyes moving with chilling efficiency until they located my father and brother. Mr. Arthur Hayes? Mr. Conrad Hayes? The lead SEC agent, Agent Torres, called out, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. We need you to come with us. We have a federal warrant for the immediate seizure of all HGF financial records and executive communications related to the Ascension Fund acquisition. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed, whispers turned to desperate chatter, and the band ceased playing mid-note. The grand, magnificent gala instantly became a crime scene. Arthur stumbled backward, bumping into a waiter who dropped a tray of champagne. This is a mistake. You have the wrong firm. This is harassment. No mistake, Mr. Hayes, Agent Torres replied, walking straight toward the Kane family. The warrant is legally sound, and your firm is being investigated for multi-million-dollar corporate fraud, market manipulation, and ethics violations. Conrad was sweating profusely, his perfect tuxedo suddenly looking like a prison uniform. He looked at Arthur, desperate for a rescue that wasn't coming. The Ascension Fund, I stated, stepping forward so I stood shoulder to shoulder with the SEC agent, is the phantom entity Conrad created to cycle investor funds. It's a classic Ponzi model, and it was due to blow up by the end of this fiscal quarter. Agent Torres looked at me, a flicker of acknowledgement in his professional gaze. And you are... I am Amelia Hayes, I announced, my voice ringing with a conviction I had never possessed before. I am a forensic data analyst, and I have spent the last 3 years compiling the full operational audit of HGF's fraudulent activities, right down to the offshore accounts. I held up a plain black laptop. Everything you need is on this drive. I am your key witness. The turning of tables was complete. My mother, Eleanor, stared at me, the horror in her eyes no longer about the ruin of the name, but the crushing realization that I was the source of that. Ruin, the necessary catalyst for the truth. You betrayed us? Eleanor shrieked, her voice high and unstable. You destroyed your own family? No, Mother, I countered, looking from her to my father, who was being read his rights by one of the officers. I didn't destroy the family. I chose to save the name. You worried I would ruin the reputation with my mere presence. But Conrad and Dad ruined the reputation with their greed. I am simply the one who chose to expose the truth before the entire structure collapsed, burying thousands of innocent investors with it. Arthur, defeated, looked at me one last time before the officers led him away. His eyes held no hatred, only a terrifying final defeat. You always were too damn good with numbers, Amelia. The weeks that followed were a chaotic, brutal blur of professional triumph and personal grief. The Hayes global finance scandal became the biggest news story of the year, the immediate fallout, and the press. My strategic timing was flawless. The exposure occurred during the gala, ensuring maximum visibility. The press swarmed the story, initially focusing on the Hayes family's spectacular fall, but the narrative quickly shifted. My name, Amelia Hayes, appeared on every major news outlet, not as one of the accused, but as the source. I had deliberately chosen a neutral, ethical consultancy firm to handle the release of my audit, ensuring the data was presented with rigor and integrity. Reporters, sensing the emotional depth of the story, were desperate to interview me. I held a single, concise press conference, delivering a statement that defined the new reality. I did not take this action against my family, I stated to the assembled cameras, my voice firm and uncompromising. I took this action against fraud. The Hayes name to me signifies integrity and ethical commitment. My father and brother chose to violate that commitment through criminal recklessness. As a forensic professional, my duty was clear: to protect the truth and the public trust. The media, which my family had always dismissed as unimportant, took that narrative and ran with it. The narrative was simple, powerful, and utterly damaging to my parents. Amelia Hayes, the woman who chose ethics over family loyalty. The Washington Post ran a front-page exposé titled, "The Hayes Whistleblower." how the unstable daughter became the family's ethical architect. Local reports called me the woman who saved the Hayes name, reframing the family legacy from one of corporate greed to one of profound, painful honesty. The financial and professional consequence for Conrad. Conrad's professional life was over. He was released on bail, but his indictment was inevitable. He tried to contact me, desperate, shifting between threats and pathetic pleas. "You're a monster, Amelia. We could have fixed this internally. You'll never get another client again. No one trusts a snitch," he raged in one desperate voicemail. I never responded. His consequence was not just the legal system, but the immediate total collapse of his entire entitled identity. He was living proof that my paranoia was merely foresight. The emotional consequence for Eleanor. My mother, Eleanor, suffered the most acute social pain. Her world, built on appearances, vanished overnight. The phone calls, the invitations, the committees, all evaporated, replaced by pity and cold judgment. She tried to fight the media narrative, giving a disastrous, tearful interview where she blamed me for destroying a legacy that took 40 years to build. The result was immediate and catastrophic. The press used her quote to reinforce my position. "The legacy was built on fraud, Mrs. Hayes. Amelia Hayes built her own legacy on truth. She requested a personal meeting, granted only in a neutral lawyer's office, 3 months after the gala." "We have lost everything, Amelia," Eleanor whispered, looking older than her years, her elegant clothes now looking worn and meaningless. "The house, the firm, your father's freedom, everything. Are you happy now?" "Happy is not the word, Mother," I replied, standing across the table. "I am relieved. I am professionally vindicated, and I am ethically clean. The house and the firm were built on lies. You confused the Hayes name with the Hayes Global Finance balance sheet. I saved the name by destroying the firm. But who will remember Arthur's achievements now?" She wept. "They will remember Arthur Hayes as a convicted felon," I stated, the brutal truth hanging between us. "But they will remember his daughter, Amelia Hayes, as the woman who chose integrity over millions. That is the new, unsullied legacy of the Hayes name, and you are living proof that I was right to fight for it." The quiet rebuilding and the final confrontation. Arthur Hayes was convicted 18 months later. Conrad pleaded guilty and served less time, but his reputation was permanently destroyed. I, meanwhile, used the capital and the enormous public visibility from the scandal to launch my own independent firm, Alpha Ethics. My client list was immediate and staggering. Governments, banks, and major corporations terrified of suffering the same fate as HGF. I became the most sought-after forensic auditor in the nation. 5 years after the gala, I had achieved the tangible importance they valued, entirely on my own terms. My firm was globally recognized. My final definitive encounter came during a quiet parole hearing for Arthur. I attended, not as a witness for the prosecution, but as a neutral professional observer. After the hearing, Arthur met me in a sterile private room. He was a broken man, gray, thin, stripped of every ounce of his former arrogance. "I heard about your firm, Amelia," he said, his voice barely a rasp. "Alpha Ethics. You're brilliant. You're worth 10 times what I ever was." "The numbers agree, Dad," I replied, the executive distance never wavering. "Why did you come today?" he asked. "To watch me fail completely?" "No," I answered. "I came to confirm that I fulfilled my obligation. You told me I ruined the family name. I spent 5 years proving that the only part of the Hayes name worth saving was the part that represented truth. And that part now belongs to me. And Eleanor? She's housed, safe, and stripped of the social performance she craves," I said. "Her consequence is living in a world that no longer validates her based on her husband's bank account. She's learning slowly what true worth is." I stood to leave. Arthur reached out, not to stop me, but just to touch my suit jacket. "The irony, Amelia. I should have made you CEO when you were 25. "You should have, Dad," I agreed. "But then I would have been corruptible. Instead, you forced me into the shadows, where I built the power to be incorruptible. Your contempt was my capital." I walked out of the room, leaving the past firmly behind me. I had achieved the importance they had denied me, not corporate importance, but ethical, unassailable significance. I had saved the true meaning of my family name by choosing truth over loyalty, and the world had rewarded me with an empire built on that single, non-negotiable choice. The ruin they predicted became the foundation of my triumph.